Will stop this face masking. Your green light, I'm asking, for the rights of the people are dear.
Senate requests that we cease the reading of House Bill 339. Is there an objection? Hearing none, the lady is recognized to open the debate.
And Mr. Speaker, I'd like to also ask unanimous consent to read from my notes.
To read from where?
My notes.
You've heard the request. Is there an objection? Hearing none, the lady may read from her notes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, good ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I want to make clear this does not prohibit you from wearing masks anytime that you want to wear masks. This does not stop private businesses from determining if you are required to wear a mask in their place of business. This is a matter of personal rights and of our liberty. First of all, I just wanted to review a little bit. In Article 1, Section 1 of our Idaho Constitution, are inalienable rights of man. All men are by nature free and equal and have certain inalienable rights. From Article 1, Section 17, unreasonable searches and seizures are prohibited, and the rights of the people to be secure in their persons and houses and papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. And we have the right to determine our personal health as well as responsibility. The third part of the Constitution that really affected me was in Section 21. It says, reserved rights not impaired, and the enumeration of rights shall not be construed to impair or deny the rights retained by the people. In fact, a gentleman sent me something, and I'll paraphrase it, but he just said that any attempted mandate that forces the use of a medical device, which a mask has been determined to be, for any reason, is between a person and their physician. This should be prescribed, and personal responsibility and personal choice should be what determines this. I have something even more, what I think is compelling reason for us to vote for this bill. I ran into a friend at a store in Idaho Falls last fall, and we were the only two ones, I think, in the store that did not have a mask on at that point. And she said, "I will never wear a mask." She proceeded to tell me that she had been raped by her husband, and he was her ex-husband at this point, but he had often covered her mouth and her nose, and she said, "There is no way I can ever wear a mask or have that feeling again on my face." After she said that, I have thought about that a lot as I have seen people wearing masks and not wearing masks, and I've considered my own aversion to being able to wear a mask. And then in our hearing in State Affairs, there were several women who were willing to share their personal pain and the trauma of similar experiences. We had a doctor of psychology that came. And when she testified, she said, "Do you know how many children are raped every day? And then can you imagine those children having to put a mask on their face to go to school the next day?" those masks were to muffle their screams and their cries. And she said they are just unable to do that. Can you imagine the trauma of that? Now we have these children who are grown, who are again required to wear a mask, to put a mask, that feeling on their face, or be denied health care, to be denied work. You may know people who cannot even go to work because this has been required now. Putting on that mask just brings up the trauma to them again. And I think that it is wrong for us to ask that of the citizens of our state. And again, what it really is, it really boils down to our liberty, our personal choice. I could give you a lot of research that says they're not that good, that they aren't good at all, but I think some of you would have research that would negate that. So I don't want to debate the research, really. I just want you to consider the real trauma, the real violation of a person to ask them to, and require them, not ask, but require them to wear a mask. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Gentleman from 17.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the good lady sponsor, would she stand for a question?
The lady yield to a question.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Lady yields.
And I have to preface my question, Mr. Speaker, by saying that for 2 sessions I was fortunate enough to sit next to the good lady, so I could just lean over and ask her questions, which we did quite a bit. And the bill it has been amended, and I'm wondering, and the way I'm reading it, and so I wanted to confirm with you, is that if someone actually was diagnosed with the virus, that person could not be required to wear a mask in public places or in employment if that person came to those public places or in employment.
Lady
Would that be right?
Mr. Speaker, good gentleman, they would not be required to wear a mask. However, they should stay at home, they should isolate, they should follow what has already been asked of us, and that's reasonable. It's reasonable for us to stay home, to isolate ourselves when we are ill.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman from 10.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate the bill. As an initial matter, may I ask unanimous consent to refer to House Bill 383 from the 2020 session?
Did it go into law?
No.
Without objection, gentleman may refer to that piece of legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rose when this bill came up the first time in opposition of the bill, and unfortunately none of those concerns have been addressed. Again, on the constitutional issue, if it's unconstitutional, we don't need a bill. If it's unconstitutional, we don't need a bill. If it's unconstitutional, we don't need a bill. On the topic of the Constitution, there remains a constitutional concern that we're overstepping what may be permitted in a courtroom with the use of the word department. It is apparent that perhaps that criticism has fallen aside. But I would direct the body's attention to Article 2, Section 1 of the Idaho Constitution, which reads, "The powers of the government of this state are divided into 3 distinct departments: the legislative, executive, and judicial." This does include courts, perhaps overstepping the constitutional separation of powers. Completely disregards the frequency with which inmates, especially those that know that they have hepatitis B or some other communicable disease, use their saliva as a weapon against jail deputies or even their own public defenders in court. It is common practice to then affix a mask so that those persons can appear in court without spitting on everybody. There are numerous cases of Ebola in the state of Washington. South of town here, if you were to go into any of the barracks, the sleeping quarters out in the middle of the desert, you'd see signs that tell you not to sweep. The reason you don't sweep out there is because the field mice carry hantavirus. And if you sweep, you kick up dust, carrying particles containing the hantavirus that can infect. So while many who go out there are members of the National Guard, many who maintain that facility are state employees who are required to wear PPE and use a water truck to clean those areas out because of the danger of sweeping. The way the legislation is drafted, again, paragraph A qualifies that the requirement may not be for the purpose of, the requirement of a mask may not be implemented for the purpose of preventing or slowing the spread of a contagious or infectious disease. Just like in the Constitution, we expect our courts to read the words that we put down for what we actually write down. And the Idaho Supreme Court has been good to comply with that, to our own chagrin at times when we'd really like them to take what we mean and not what we say, as I like to tell my kids at times. But the words we use matter, and the fact that that phrase is not in B or C or D is going to be interpreted to mean that B, C, and D mean something different than A. Or excuse me, it's not in C. It was added to B. Entry, education, employment, or other service. And finally, the newest addition, the enforcement clause. Let me make sure I have the engrossed version up. Mr. Speaker, I apologize. It says a violation of subsection 1 of this section shall result in the termination of any disaster, emergency, or public health order. Any. And in the English, any means any. In place at the time of the violation. So the secretary at a charter school in Coeur d'Alene requiring somebody to wear a mask to enter an office could terminate a drought declaration in Minidoka County. Moreover, a member of a staff, perhaps sympathetic to the need to overturn an emergency declaration,
All right, the ladies objected, saying that the motives of the sponsors have been impugned. As you proceed, please take that objection into consideration.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I wasn't talking about the sponsor. I was talking about a hypothetical individual, lower level, who might be sympathetic to the overturning of an emergency order that was in place.
That's in order. Please proceed.
Could overrule, the receptionist could overrule the county commissioners by simply requiring somebody to put on a mask. Think about that. They could completely void the emergency declaration just by requiring a mask before somebody came in. It could be their best friend. It could be their spouse. So long as they did it and they violated this section, they could undo what their bosses just did. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I have no doubt that many have found these requirements repugnant. There are, however, ladies in my life who have experienced things that cause me to bristle at comparing a mask mandate to a sexual assault. We attempted to advance House Bill 383 last year to much opposition in this body as a means to help sexual assault survivors. There are things that can be done in that realm. Hyperbolizing the debate about masks is not one of them. This bill is a nice statement to make, and so if you're here to make a statement, it's a perfectly appropriate thing to vote for. But if you're here to govern, its technical deficiencies are far too great for it to ever be successfully implemented. Thank you.
There further debate? Gentleman from 17.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I understand, and I've had probably 100, maybe hundreds of conversations with people about wearing masks versus not wearing masks. Tons of conversations with constituents. Okay, let's set aside the wearing masks versus not wearing a mask controversy for a minute, and just consider that there is a time and a place where a mask should be required. And I think that's when somebody's contagious. I think that's when somebody has been exposed to the virus, maybe with a family member, and is in that period of time afterwards that the virus could be transmitted. There are times, I think, where we might all agree that a mask should be required and that it's appropriate to require a mask. We won't agree that it should be all the time. We won't, and there's going to be all kinds of arguments, and we know that. But unfortunately, this bill goes too far and provides a reason for not, provides a basis for not wearing a mask, even if you're contagious, even if you've been exposed to the virus, maybe with your family member. And in closing, I would just remind the body that, you know, we do have requirements for wearing clothing, such as men have to wear ties here in this body. This isn't. I know it gets, and I want to stay away from getting into the argument about the constitutional right not to wear a mask or to wear a mask, but there are times when this needs to happen in order to protect everybody else from the condition you may have. And because this bill does not address that, it should be, I'd urge you to vote no. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Is there further debate? Gentleman from 13.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, the mask issue is always a fascinating one. I want to thank the gentleman from 17 and the gentleman from 10 for their comments, because this, I have questions about the language of the bill as well. But I think this goes to a little bit of a deeper philosophical question maybe, and that's maybe what it's pointing at. One of my favorite philosophers is John Locke, who is the father of liberalism, actually. And something that he said in the Second Treaty of Government, when the people were claiming power from a king, was that every man, at the time it was a man, but we understand every person, has a right to a property in and of his own person. And no one has a right to that but himself. And I think that's where these masks have seemed to so many Idahoans to be an oppression is because it's been forced on them, on their person, on the one thing in this world that we are guaranteed to own. And so, I'll be honest, I don't know right now how I'm going to vote on this. I hope there will be more discussion on it. But I do want us to think about the principle that is being brought up. I mean, this is the philosophy that founded our entire concept of human rights. And so, with that, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, good gentleman. Is there further debate? Gentleman from 24.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the good lady rise for a question?
Will the lady yield to a question?
The good lady yields.
Lady
Yeah.
yields.
Thank you very much. My question is basically, as I read through the bill and engrossment, I'm trying to find, are there any exceptions to this law? Is there any situation where a government could, or, I'm thinking about county hospital, for example, could they require masks? So are there any exceptions to this?
Lady from District 35.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good gentlemen. Yes, in the bill, it exempts hospitals from this mandate. It was kind of a compromise because we actually had, I have had emails and I've had, there was debate, testimony. In the hearing, a woman had a very visible tumor lump on her throat, and she had tried to go to the hospital. It really affects her eyes and her face, and because she will not or cannot wear a mask, they won't let her in to get that taken care of. And so even though we have exempted that, it was very difficult for me to include that because as I outlined, there are people, we don't even know what their challenges are, but they are unable to wear a mask. So it does exempt the hospitals and healthcare facilities.
Okay. Thank you for directing me there. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Lady from 8.
Thank you, Speaker, to speak in support of the bill. And I guess I am going to make a statement. So as far as this bill is concerned, I think a lot of us know that people are upset. A lot of people are upset about having to wear masks. In my district, since we had some of the lowest numbers in the state as far as transmission rate, as far as death overall, and when I see that McCall just extended their masking until May 26, which is a recreational type of community, a lot of the businesses are suffering, are going to continue to suffer for another couple of months. They don't want this mask mandate to continue. But of course, the excuse that they're using is that all of these folks coming in for recreation are going to be, vectors and spreading COVID, which to me has pretty much been dropped or leveled in the numbers to where the pandemic doesn't exist in the state. As far as other issues, I have kids in Idaho City, little elementary kids who are still being masked again, despite the fact there are hardly any cases, because one person on the school board thinks it's in their best interest to keep a mask despite the pleas of the parents to take those masks off their face and let them get back to school without breathing whatever they breathe in that mask all day long. My dad had COPD. He was a car painter, and he was also in World War II and given a lot of Pall Mall non-filters while he was there. So when he passed, he had about 12% of his lungs left. My dad, I remember, he said, "Susie, the way I breathe is that it's like as if I'm laying in a bathtub and sucking through a little coffee stir straw every day. There's no way in the world he could put a mask on. There's no way in the world he would be, have folks pointing at him or being disrespectful because no way he could put a mask on." He's not the only one. There are a lot of people with COPD and other respiratory problems that can't put a mask on. So I think the idea of covering people's faces, you know, even walking through these halls and looking at these lobbyists, I don't even know who they are anymore because all I see is a mask. I don't even know who I'm talking to. So it's really important that we do have our faces uncovered so we can have those social cues. And I think the issue as far as wearing a mask, please wear it if you need to. But if you don't, give us the freedom to not have to wear them. So I'd appreciate your green light on this bill. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Gentleman from 34.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand in support of the bill. We've been getting emails all session long on a variety of issues. One of the key issues has been on freedom and mask mandates, emergency orders, and all sorts of things going on in the last year. This is a matter of personal freedom, that your health and safety is your responsibility primarily. It is not government's responsibility. We might talk about local control, how this might, I've heard it said that, oh, this violates local control. I would respond with this. There is nothing more local than letting individuals decide for themselves what the best course of action is. And all this bill does is says that government is not going to tell you what to do or force you into what to do. It allows you the freedom to make responsible decisions on your own. And it's as simple as that. I've gotten many emails on this, and the people are on the side of 339. They are tired of government telling them everything to do, and they're ready to make decisions for themselves and return to the individual freedoms that we're guaranteed in our constitutions. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Gentleman from 13.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate in favor of the bill.
You have the floor.
This issue, the mask issue, is very controversial and highly divisive. And when we talked about masks in the start of session in my committee, I said I want to make sure that we're respectful of the opinions of each individual member. I don't know the reason that they made the decision that they made to wear a mask or not wear a mask, but we need to make sure that that individual member has the right to make that decision for themselves. The testimony in committee, Mr. Speaker, was shocking. Would probably be the word that I would use. I remember going home that night and telling my wife, people have different reasons for being against wearing a mask, but I, prior to that hearing, had never heard the argument that was put forth by not one, two, but several women, that for them to wear a mask was extremely difficult because of prior trauma in their life. Whether it was sexual abuse or whether it was being raped, the perpetrator had put their hand over their mouth in order to silence them. And they said, every time we're required to wear a mask, that mental anguish, that trauma is relived again and again and again. The good lady and I talked about the amendments that the gentleman from 10 sought to put on the bill with respect to the court. I have no problem with those amendments. I thought that they were reasonable amendments. However, in speaking with the good lady from 35, her concern was, what about these women if they have to go into a courtroom? That's already a very uncomfortable place for most citizens to be, a courtroom. We're not used to being there. If you're an attorney, it's normal. But for an average citizen, it's not. And so to have that trauma as you go into that courtroom would be difficult. So she chose to leave those amendments off. However, I would leave you with this final thought. If the government can today require us to wear a mask, tomorrow it could require us to all obtain a vaccine. What's it going to require next? It's my belief that we are starting down a very dangerous slope of taking away personal choices, individual liberties, and the government is doing that all in an attempt to provide safety and security. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I would err on the side of personal liberty and freedom, and I would allow individuals to make these choices, and I would ask for your green light. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Hearing none? Will the good lady from District 35 please stand and close the debate?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to address a few of the things that were debated today. I appreciate all the good debate. So, as to the courts, as the good gentleman from 10, I believe it is. So, it is unquestionable that the court has control of their process. And so it would be pointless to exempt them in this proposed statute. The courts determine the constitutional access within their purview, their scope. And my objective is not to bend the court's authority or to attempt to override the court's authority. But I'm convinced that it is the constitutional right of citizens to have access to the court system. And one of my concerns was expressed by the good gentleman from 13. If the courts choose to deny access and the constitutional right of a citizen, this proposed statute would have no effect on them. But I do believe that citizens have the right. So I don't believe that exempting the courts and excluding the courts is appropriate. So that would be determined at that level. A couple of the other concerns. The good gentleman from 17, I appreciate his concerns about people choosing not to wear masks. But when did that start? It just started in the last, 14 months? People didn't ordinarily walk down the street with a mask on. We probably all have some germs and the flu has been around forever, and we have not demanded that our citizens wear masks in the past. We always encourage people to stay home when you're sick. That's like common sense. And so he did say something about we should respect our constitutional rights, and when we have a but, we better be paying attention because as far as I know, there are no buts in the Constitution. If this body concludes that universal and mandatory masks is a specific violation of your liberty, then this bill is necessary. I wanted to say one more thing. I should have said that last, but the good lady from 8 that was talking about our children in our schools. It reminded me of the many, many emails I've received. I had one from a physician that lives kind of in my area, and he said that he has seen so much of an increase of anxiety and depression, and his own children who attend public school are showing these signs of anxiety and frustration. They can't communicate properly with their peers, and he just says he's very concerned about his own children, as I know many of us are about our children and our grandchildren. As I see those who are in our midst that are required for safety purposes, our state police, I don't even know what most of them look like because we're not able to see them. And I did ask one state police what he thought of the mask mandate, and he said, well, we can't communicate as well. And so that's a concern rolled up in all of this. So I ask you to consider our personal rights and our personal choices. And I ask you to consider what the good gentleman from 13 said, in addition to my concerns about people who have things that you don't even know what's within them that prohibits them in their own minds and heart from wearing the mask. And I ask for your green light. Thank you very much.
The debate is closed. The question before us is, shall House Bill 339 as amended pass the House? The Clerk will unlock the machine and the members will record their votes. Does any member wish to change his vote? The clerk will lock the machine and read the pairs.
Ehart votes aye. Necochea votes nay. Gestrin votes aye. Toon votes nay.
Vote count shows 46 in favor with 23 against and 1 absent. House Bill number 339 as amended has passed the House and will be referred to the Judiciary Rules Administration Committee for engrossing. Gentleman from 14.